I want to talk about failures. Basically, as an industry, I have seen in my short period, like career span in 6 years, that as an industry, we celebrate our success a lot. And well, we don't really talk about failures for probably good reasons. But I would like any one of you to share maybe a failure story, or maybe, a not so successful story. What I really want to get out of this is to send the message to the youth delegates that it's okay to fail, but it's important to learn from it.
Right? I said to you, no escape.
So, what have you got against the Irish?
Go ahead.
As an Irishman, I used to say that I was once asked by an MBA course about, Brian, what kind of drives you forward and on? I said, well, growing up, I used to blame the English for everything as an Irishman. That was our culture almost, yeah? But guess what? I got over it. And I think in many ways, before I go on to my failures, we'll talk about it's getting over them and accepting failures and learning from them. Oh goodness, in 32 years, there's so many things you try, and I can think of, particularly in the operational side, I can think of many instances where, a decision taken was more on luck than on, insight, yeah? And so I look at these potential failures where, I've been in a situation where I have actually put people at risk. And it wasn't my brilliant management or leadership that didn't lead to a fatality, it was luck. And I think it was, we were talking about the issues of managing safety in the business. It is inherently, particularly in the upstream and midstream part of the business, it has its risks. And, when you have to contemplate as a manager that sort of situation, yes, it makes you think, and you recognize that there was a potential failure and failing on my part, but then luck plays a role. It also teaches you that you really need to minimize luck in this business, yeah? And so that's that side of it. But, I like to say is that, in life, you're allowed to make mistakes. And I think a company that actually has a learning culture which allows employees, particularly in the formative years, to make mistakes in a relatively safe environment is a company which will grow the fastest. And I must say, I was very lucky in my time. I can remember the very first time I made a decision or a recommendation. I was 1 year working in a refinery in Rotterdam. And I said, well, why don't you do a certain change of lineup? And somebody said to me, what a good idea, let's try it. I was in shock. Because, as a student, you're allowed to, have an opinion without, without accountability or without consequences. Here I was, I had actually made a recommendation. They were going to act on it, and within a very short time, I was going to be proved right or wrong. Which brings us to the last very embarrassing moment I had, and that was I was sitting in a control room, and it was a catalytic cracker. And they were having problems starting it up. And so I had done my calculations, and I said, I know what the solution is. I said, you need to change that thing there. And there was an experienced day supervisor standing behind me, and he says, nah. But I had spoken this, you see, with the refinery manager was there, the superintendent was there. My reputation was on the line. Day supervisor was right, I was wrong. Took me a while to get over that one, yeah? But it's good to be wrong sometimes, yeah? And it's good to stand back and say, okay, learn from it, move on, and have the courage to persevere. Yeah?
Hinda, just this morning we also had some projection how a career could look like in the industry which we have here in the gas or the oil industry. If you're sitting here in Kuala Lumpur, everything is nice, air conditioning and so on. One of the guys was saying, look, if you want to go in this industry, you have to also go to the desert. The places where we are working, ExxonMobil is talking about, Shell, Arctic, 6 months of darkness, minus 30 degrees, you have to be tough. How is Schlumberger looking to this kind of challenges? Because you have a lot of youngsters standing all over the world. Mm-hmm. How much jumping out of the boat after a couple of months? Or is it you lock them up?
KL is very nice indeed, but we don't do a lot of work in the field in KL itself. So still, I think our industry, most of the work is done in remote places, offshore, onshore, Arctic, as you've mentioned. Even when you are onshore in some countries, is actually not the most cosmopolitan spots and generally require a different lifestyle. So I think the young people joining today are still, you know, we always have these discussions about the young peoples of today and young people of the past. But the reality is the people we look for in this industry are people who can adapt to change, are not afraid to embrace a different culture, to deal with new communities, to step out of that comfort zone. And I think as far as we look for this kind of people, regardless of which generation they belong to, then we are hitting the right people. And that's what we do in the company I work for. So what we do, to answer your question, is really we give them all the tools they need to feel comfortable, give them all the training required, make sure they are well versed into the safety aspects of it, the HSE overall, making sure they are knowledgeable about what they will do, and making sure, very important, because I think we work in dangerous places as well, that we have done all our homework and due diligence to provide the adequate duty of care as they go to these difficult places. And I think it's very important as people, young people join our industry, that they feel well taken care of, well developed, well trained, and above all, valued for the kind of work they will provide and the kind of value they will add to our business. So this is really what we do. And I think, if I can add to that, I think this industry remains extremely magic, since the subject of our discussion is the magic in the new generation. I think if you are that kind of person interested to know new things, to try new things, and to tackle quite a bit of unknown, then there is still a lot of magic in what we do.
Thank you. Juan, coming a little bit back on the movie, the mindset of what we're now talking about, real issues, how the market looks like, and how you can find your own way in this market. Also, the social media is playing a big role. One of the pensioners into the room, I will not call any name, but he was asking, what is the role of the social media? Because in Europe, especially in Europe, it's always connected to security of supply, more or less a bad image. It's put forward by the social media. How do you look to this kind of impact from the social media on our natural gas business?
Well, I think that as some of the youth, young people commented in the video, we deal with honesty. I think we try to say things how they are and to explain the truth in order that people get the right information. We also, well, I think all energy companies, at least in Enagas, we have a good team and we dedicate a lot of resources to communicate with the media, to accept all the interviews we are asked for, providing the message and also trying to make people understanding that using energy has also some burdens. So things, for instance, well, in Europe it's very difficult now laying a pipeline or high voltage line tension. It's very complicated because people don't want the problems or the times where the work is going on. So we try to meet the local populations. We try to contact the media in every place we work in order they get all the information and that they understand why the complications, the burdens we bring to them will benefit them later on. And for gas, I think it's easier than for electricity because pipelines have the advantage that we create some problems when they are constructing, but later on they are underground. The grass grows again on and almost you don't notice that they're underground as a pipeline laid down. So it's an advantage for electricity, at least in Spain and I think in most European countries that they have very tough times because permanent facilities being seen, it's not what population, what people likes more. But I think we all do our best in communication and at least in Enagas we are quite satisfied of the results.
We have to talk more to the environment?
Sorry?
We have to talk more to the environment to explain how it works and how it fits and how well done it is?
Yes, I think that we have to make most possible to communicate, yes, to dedicate as much time as possible, as much resources.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Because you're talking about how difficult it is to have work, to have business in some of these countries. And my question is that I know that our companies are all for making money, for one important reason. We are existing, we have to make money. And my question is that useful, or is that worse for the whole industry to get more aligned, to work more close with each other, to build a better image just for our business and for our attraction to young people? It's not only for social responsibility, because we are energy company. We are bring energy to human, which is the one of the challenges of human in the 21st century. So it's our commitment to the society. So do you think it's worse for the whole industry to get more aligned?
A lot of people like to talk about CSR, corporate social responsibility, and company B. But for us in Petronas, I prefer to call it CSI. Okay, it's not the CSI that you see Miami or CSI New York, but it's corporate social investment. So we need to invest in society, invest in the people. And so what we do, one of the CSI that Petronas do, that we invest in education and awareness. And that's one area where we can collaborate. You mentioned about companies. That's where I think a lot of companies, we can come together and actually do CSI. Okay, and we are doing it quite extensively in Malaysia. In Malaysia itself, with Petronas and our PSC partners, we are doing it together to actually invest mainly in education. In education, because all these perceived things that the industry is a dirty industry, pollution, sunset industry and all that, is all perceived. So when we work together to educate and create awareness, not only for people to join our industry, but people that's looking in and saying negative things about the industry, that's where the industry players can work together on these issues.
Emma, on education, a question from the room, is not a problem, somebody is saying, is not a problem we have too many offering all kind of schools and all kind of institutes dealing with the professional education of people going into the energy industry. My question to you is it also not that the major companies like ExxonMobil, Shell, BP, Petronas, Gazprom have their own institution inside that the youth don't know where to fit in, to start with courses outside, finally getting into a major company and there is a known program, an internal program where they get picked up. How we have to combine this, how we can explain that where you should start, as a trainee to a major company or already investing in yourself in a certain institute outside and then try to get in the major industry?
We do some of both in ExxonMobil, but you know, we have a long-term orientation and we never stop learning. We're always training people through working with others, through formal training programs, through you know, exposure to different types of jobs across different types of organizations and different cultures. So you know, I think the key is you never stop learning. You come in with the right type of sort of technical background or commercial background or whatever it might be, and then there's a series, in a big company like ExxonMobil, there's a series of training programs that you would be offered sort of formally, that would be part of that, but a lot of on-the-job training and a lot of interaction to continue learning. Whether it's an external program, an internal program, you know, we like to tailor some of our own training because we are able to then deliver some specific messages that are important to us about how we work and what we are trying to achieve. But you know, many of our programs we use outside providers to help us deliver some of those messages too. So I think it's both can work, but the key is never stop learning and never stop growing. And we do that all our careers.
Uni, you take them from the street or also internal?
We do both.
Also both?
We do both. We do offer scholarships for both, not only Malaysians, but also international students, especially the countries that we operate in. And at the same time, we also have our own internal programs. And with that, we actually have in fact 4 learning institutes that we actually sponsor to actually do targeted training for the industry. So we do both.
Both also, clear.